We've got some big dual position changes that are about to hit the game. It will absolutely shape up what your defensive and forward premiums look like for the rest of the season. But who's getting DPP? Who's locked in? Who's close? And how do you even guarantee that you get it? We got you covered as we head towards our first dual position announcement for the upcoming AFL Fantasy SuperCoach and Dream Team season for 2025. Hey, it's MJ from the Coaches Panel. I do hope you are well. 3 times a year, we get dual position added to players throughout the season. It's really pretty simple. Ultimately, champion data are the gatekeepers of whether or not a player gets a position or not. And there's a couple of criteria. First, the 3 times you can get it is at the conclusion of round 5, so heading into round 6, the conclusion of round 11, and the conclusion of round 17. So those are the 3 times. And really, the core criteria is a player must spend a minimum 35% in a secondary position that right now they are not currently listed in. And that is how you're eligible. And you do need to play a minimum of 3 games in that set criteria of time. So that's how it all kind of works. You can't lose a dual position status, and you can't gain a third positional status. You can on a different platform and keep it, but you can't in what champion data do. So those are the positional elements. We're about to get a ton of them hit the game. Do you want to know who I think is locked to get it? Let's go line by line through the big names. I'll try to keep it as fantasy relevant as possible because there's, I think, about 50, maybe a fraction more, that are going to pick up an additional positional status, but I'll try to keep it at names that might be relevant for you in your classic team or if you're drafting on AFL Fantasy or SuperCoach. Anyway, let's jump in. Look, Dylan Shiel's picking it up, 74% time in this defensive position, even if he plays 100% mid this week, gather round. That's just not going to change. Lock him in. He is an absolute certainty. I don't think that makes him classic relevant for us, but if you're drafting on these platforms, it makes him somewhat handy for you. So you'll take that, won't you? Especially given the fact he's actually scoring decent when he plays through the mid. Anyway, let's see what Essendon do this week. Finn O'Sullivan, one of the more popular cash cows for us this week. He will pick up defensive status. He's hit the game threshold, and I think he's exclusively playing through there, like knocking on the door of 100% playing as a defender. Not scoring as grand as we like, but he's showing us these green shoots of the type of fantasy and footballer that he's going to be. I don't mind him as a hold, as a long burn, and having this defensive status should make trades even easier. You do have utility in AFL Fantasy. You do have flex in Dream Team and SuperCoach. So moving players around is easier than ever, but getting this status, I think, is really helpful and really handy. Next up, I'm going to give it to Rory Laird. Knocked on the door, if not again, like O'Sullivan, almost 100% defensive status is what he's been playing. He's an absolute shoo-in to get it. I think the fact that he got subbed out in the game last week against the Suns actually means he's an interesting obtainable option to consider for AFL Fantasy. He's going to be in and around that 90s sort of averaging marker, which I don't think's enough in SuperCoach for what it's worth, but he is going to sit in that pocket of space. And in AFL Fantasy, if he gets to under 900,000 or around that price point, which if he dishes up a couple of 80s and low 90s for you, he's probably going to get there. He might be an interesting consideration. It's not yet, but it's an absolute certainty. He's going to get it. Someone I don't mind in a SuperCoach draft format is a Jack Silvani. He'll pick up defensive status. He's spent around about 3/4 of his game time in that space, and he's just an absolute shoo-in. There's no question about him. He's a lock. It's happening. And SuperCoach draft especially, that's handy because those intercept marks that he can take, those possessions of where he's able to impact the game, those long kicks out of defense, we do know how impactful the weighting of scoring goes for SuperCoach. So you can lock Jack Silvani in as another defender gain. Maybe not as critical, but again, in the same veins of O'Sullivan, Connor Stone will pick up defensive status. It's a massive percentage that he's sitting there. Again, it's high 90s from that end. He's just in that space. He's in that zone. And again, like an O'Sullivan, like a Wicks, he'll get it too, by the way. Lock Sam Wicks in for picking up defender status, what both of these guys will do is just add that ease of tradability. Maybe you're looking at going, oh, how do I get into a Nick Dacos in a couple of weeks' time? How do I get into a Harry Shiel in a couple of weeks? Well, these additional positions, don't really gain much for your scoring or gain much in terms of their relevance. They just add squad flexibility to you. So I think both that move for Stone and that move also for Wicks becomes really important gains. Look, a couple of others for draft. Jasper Fletcher, I think is handy. Jace Burgoyne, I think he's going to do enough to get it. I wouldn't say he's a lock, but he's as close to a lock as I'm prepared to say. Based on the data that Champion Data, say that 10 times fast, have released, it looks like he's at 42% time as a defender. So another game exclusively on the wing might skew that completely out for us. But if Port Adelaide are playing true to what they've been doing so far this year, I feel confident that lands. I don't think that puts him in the top 10 conversation. His scoring's still really volatile for a number of different reasons. But I'm okay to get your hands on it. For draft, this is huge in AFL Fantasy and SuperCoach. It's a great gain. But to me, he should get it. Certain, no, but he should get it. The last defender that I think is certain to get it, and will probably fly under the radar a little bit in contrast to others, is Josh Dacos. I think he's that sort of low 90s sort of territory player in AFL Fantasy. And in SuperCoach, if a few variables go his way, I think it could be quite a pick. I'm interested to keep an eye on him because over the next 2 weeks, he's covering for the absence of Dan Houston. And then the 2 weeks after that, the fixture's actually a really nice matchup for run and carry and distributing and scoring from transition defenders. So to me, this next month could be a really interesting time to see what Josh Dacos does. Again, the fixtures in 2 weeks are really favourable. The fixtures for this coming fortnight, starting this week at Gather Round, really open up. Regardless, even if he played forward pocket for this entirety of the game, or sat on the bench the entire game, he's met the game's threshold. He's almost at 100% exclusivity. To me, this one is an absolute certainty and a sneaky one to consider. I don't think there's a heap of value in it, but I don't think there's the risk of the basement that can come crashing with some of these other new defenders that we might be hitting. Who are some midfielders that we're about to gain? Well, politely, it's the least relevant gains. Not because we don't want them gaining midfield, but all it is squad flexibility. That's all you're gaining with these players. And a lot of the gains, at least the first 5 or 6 names I want to reference to you, that you've got in your team at the moment, and maybe 1 or 2 of them you're looking to move out of your team. But Joel Frazier, to me, should pick up midfield status. He is getting some time forward as well. And what Champion Data have come out and said is, look, if a player like a Frazier, and there are some others, that are playing in multiple new positions, in contrast to their current listed position, they'll actually just award the dual position or the secondary position to whichever of the two is higher. And in that instance, while I think he's sitting in the mid to high 20s for forward status, it's 46% midfield right now. So I just think it's an absolute no-brainer. To be fair, though, if you're rocking him in Classic beyond this week, you're just hoping for something that appeared in round 1 and round 2, but hasn't since then. I'd be moving him off. Bice, friends, come on. It's where you should be going, let alone going up to any of the other primo defenders that are there. Anyway, next, Jackson McRae. You knew this was coming, didn't you? We knew he'd pick up mid status. I thought he was going to be mid forward at the start of the year. The fact that he was pure forward just meant that data of how much time forward he was in his last year at the Dogs was just so wild. Mid forward, give him the midfield status, lock it in. You've got him in your team. It's a no-brainer. Another, like in the vein of Frazier, that's playing in multiple positions, that will gain a secondary one, but it'll be the one that's the higher of the two, Harry Shiel. He's spending about 55% of his time at the moment through the midfield. Now, that changed a little bit, that data trend, given he spent a bit more time behind the ball. But there was a moment where he was tracking towards also gaining forward status. He's around about 29-30% forward. So if it was a clean skin in the eyes of champion data about where this guy was playing, he'd actually right now just be a pure mid, but he'd be closer to a mid forward than a defender mid, which is the status he is going to hold once lockout lifts at the end of this round. So a handy own, again, just adding that versatility. You compare him with the likes of Sinclair and O'Sullivan. All of a sudden you can start these really easeable squad maneuverings, which is really helpful as we get through upgrade season and we get into our upgrade cadence. We can actually get who we want in the position we want, and juggle things around relatively easy. Isaac Rankin, about 74% time in the mid. I expect him to play a little bit more time forward on Thursday night for Gather Round. You might be watching it and already know how that's gone. But I think with the ins the Crows have, even if he plays, he's playing more forward. If at all, we'll wait and see what happens there. Again, he's played enough game time through that. And as many games needed, if not more, he's an absolute lock for mid, as is Sam Davidson at the Western Bulldogs, playing exclusively across that wing. Yeah, he is working up and back into the defensive 50 and forward 50, but it's from a guy that is anchored positionally as a wingman. He's picking up midfield status. And then the last one, I don't think it's hugely classic relevant. Also, I don't think it's hugely draft relevant, but that's where he's relevant for us at this stage on SuperCoach and AFL Fantasy Draft platforms, and that's Colby McKercher. I think he picks up mid status. He's playing across that wing. He's actually looking really silky and skillful. He's just not in a position that's prime for fantasy points at the moment, but I think that's where that's going. I think we're going to see him lock that in. I'm just projecting. Oh, it just went all Kiwi on you. Projecting the one ruck gain in this, at least from a relevance perspective, and that's a Sam De Koning again. This is being, it's out on a Thursday. So tonight you could arguably say, even if he plays defence, which based on Stanley playing, Blixarves in, and the Crows 3 tall forwards, I do have him playing exclusively as a defender against the Crows. Even if he did that, much like he did last week against Melbourne, I just see him playing too much time now for the year. He's going to pick up ruck status. Defender ruck status is super fun and interesting to have as a draft. I think it's almost time to go. If not this week, it's next in Classic. But for drafters, yeah, we know it's a long season and that Stanley will find a way out of that side again, and you'll probably want your hands on SDK as well. So for draft, it's handy. It's very, very handy. For Classic, he won't be in your team within the fortnight anyway, so it probably doesn't matter. All right, the ruck's helpful, but doesn't matter hugely outside of draft. The mids, politely, is flexibility and nothing else. The defender gains, we've got a couple that are going to knock on the door of top 10 premium territories and do become a little interesting, let alone the cash cows that have added for us. But the adding of the forwards is where we're about to see some interesting gains for us. The number one draft pick last year, Sam Lawless, spent 70% of game time forward at the moment, an absolute shoe-in to get. He was awesome last week against the Lions. And the gaining of the forward status just, again, means you can take these midfield scoring rooks, put them on field if you've got room in your forward line, and all of a sudden you can start upgrading your lower caliber rookies, whether it be your Stones, your Cacos, your Wicks, your Berries, whomever it is, through your forward line, a Henderson who'll pick up forward status. Surprise. All of a sudden you can start to then get the better quality mid-rooks that are coming through, such as your Clay Hall, your Gross from the Eagles. And you can now just go, all right, I'll move my Lawler over here into the forward line, happy days, and I'll do that, and I can start my upgrading. And that's how you can increase your scoring in a real simple, easy way without trading. So to me, look, 71% time forward, he's an absolute shoe-in. Oh, it's not a shoe-in, but I'm pretty confident it's going to land. Christian Petracca to gain forward status. I think it's going to happen. It would take a drastic change from Melbourne this week, gather round, to see him lose it. He's at 42% time forward, so even if he doesn't play, there's no injury risk, don't panic, that we know about. He's past that threshold of 35%, which is the threshold you need to have in champion data's eyes. It would take an exclusive forward exclusion in this game for it to be an opportunity, and even in the days where he has been that sort of 65, 70, 75% centre bounce attendance guy, they'd still have him forward because of how damaging he is through there. So confident that he picks up forward status, yes. Is it an absolute certainty? Well, no, there's a small slither of doubt that it might not land, but I'm pretty confident that it's going to happen. And right now in this role, in AFL Fantasy, I still wouldn't trade into him because there's not the volume of ball that he's getting to accumulate around the ground. And there's also not the quality of service forward that he's going to knock on that doors of 90 right now. And we've got guys that are absolutely lights out for us at the moment delivering, and guys that are a little bit cheaper that are exceeding him right now. Now, SuperCoach is a little different, the way the weighting works, the impact of the possessions, what he does, where he does, how he does it. SuperCoach does rank that from a scoring a little bit higher than the pure +3, +2 data points that AFL Fantasy give us. So I still think he's a decent shout for you in SuperCoach even now, once he picks up forward status at the end of the round. Let's hope it happens. I'm pretty confident it does. But to me, that sits in that pocket through there. So I'm up for that. James Peatling. It's Peatling season. 54% time forward. He will also pick up forward status. He's had a decent last couple of weeks. It feels like he's found his role in that side a little bit more, and it's a bit more reflective of the scoring I thought that he would have during the season, kind of sitting around that sort of 85 to 90 sort of range across the formats. I know some are pretty bullish and keen that he'll be a decent forward option. I think as the game slows down mid-season, he should consistently score more. But his time in the midfield hasn't boosted. And given the Crows ins this week, I don't see that changing for gather round. Again, you might already know the outcome of how that's gone. But to me, I think he's a good pick. I don't think he's a top 10 forward. I don't think he's going to do enough to do that. I think as a money maker, it might be okay. But the fact that he's had 2 shockers and 2 rippers, I'd probably not be jumping anytime soon, but it's a fair and necessary gain. He's adding forward status. And one of the other reasons I probably wouldn't look to go into him, despite there being potentially some money to make, is not only are we about to get Lawler adding forward status, we're about to get Levi Ashcroft. He will gain forward status. 65% of the game's time is spent in the forward line. And again, we do have him on field in our midfield. Well, you should, but to be able to slide him into your F6, maybe your F5, if you're not running too many mid-price options through there, is an absolute luxury. And so to be able to take that to there, well, Peatling you'd only be getting because he's gained forward status. It's not because he's that great of a moneymaker across the lines in contrast to what's available in other lines. So to me, Ashcroft into the forwards. And if you wanted to get that guy that's capable of 90s, 95s, 100s, who's that guy? Peatling could, but I think there might be some better options at comparable price points. We are seeing some of our premiums step out. We are seeing some drastic opening up of opportunities in Essendon and Hawthorn with some long-term injuries today and a shorter-term injury to Caldwell. So there's opportunities that are bound. I'd probably hunt rather there than the hope that the Crows trend keeps going. So to me, that's where I'd be going. But back to Ashcroft, just a star of a kid. He's been a ripper. He's doing everything I anticipated he would do, dishing up that sort of regularly sort of 65 to 85 sort of range. There's been the odd game where it's been below that, but he'll probably be one of the last rooks that you upgrade this year. It's been a great pick and well done. You should have jumped on at the start of the year. If you didn't, because there was that sub-risk concern, you probably have corrected the course now and you're about to be rewarded with forward status. Want a couple more? Nick Martin, I think he's going to pick up forward status. I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we talked about if it was clean skin of champion data, what would be position that you'd give a Nick Martin? He'd actually be listed as a mid forward is where he would be and had nothing to do with defensive status. He's playing between the wing, a little bit of inside mid, and as a high half forward, which is actually where he and how he was recruited and where he started his AFL career at. But he's picking up forward status because, again, of the two of these positions, the higher is forward status. He's about 55% forward, 44% mid. So, again, if he plays exclusively wing this week, he might gain mid. And that's only because it might drift to be the higher. But if the trend of what Essendon have showed us this year holds for at least one more week, him gaining forward status is really interesting. Essendon have a great fixture coming up. He's bottoming out in price. And a defender forward link is interesting, let alone if, now I don't think it's going to happen, but if Brother Scott moves Nick Martin back into that distribution role off half-back, it could be amazing. I don't think it's happening because even last year when he was in that role, they put him to half forward because they needed goal scoring options, and they're down a goal scoring option or two more than they were 12 months ago. So I don't think it's happening, but on the possibility that it does, he should be across your classic formats. Absolutely a consideration. Look, I think he's going to pick up forward status. It's a slight risk that flips in the eyes of champion data, and he plays exclusive mid this week, and the forward data drops to the point that it's below the mid. That is a realms of possibility. But right now, I'd say it's more likely that he's going to pick up forward status, given it's, 10, 11% ahead of the midfield. Don't you screw me over, Brother Scott. Patrick Dangerfield will also pick up forward status. He's sitting at about 55% right now. I think for SuperCoach, it becomes interesting. We do expect he'll get managed through the year. We know Geelong want their stars primed for September. In draft, it's awesome because you get a guy that you probably jagged late, given he had a minimally filled out preseason, and he started slow. So to throw him into your forward line, given there's a dearth of decent options in there, I think is a great gain for coaches. But in classic, in SuperCoach, where the impact per possession of what he does and how he plays is so heavily rewarded, could just make it an interesting consideration and an option. I'm probably not going to go there. Probably wouldn't advocate it, but at least it's a keep an eye on it through there. So Patrick Dangerfield picking up forward status. Look, Harry Sharp, he'll pick it up at Melbourne. Henderson from the Demons will pick it up. Again, these are cash cows and rooks that are, if they're in your ecosystem, they're not doing much for you, but they might be floating around. Let me give you a couple more. Draft handy. Sam Draper should pick up forward status. He's over 50%. Essendon are continuing to run a heavy dual ruck setup, and Draper is the more exclusive forward, and then is the relief option, whereas Brian is the 100% style R1 option, and then rests a little bit forward and then is off the ground just to not be too tall and immobile as a team. I think it's handy for drafts. I think his scoring is okay. And again, whatever you've been probably fielding at your last forward spot, if it's a 5 forwards on field, every chance that Draper's a better scorer than whoever that is in most teams and in most leagues, I think it's worth an option. So jump in there, go and grab it, especially ahead of it, because that positional isn't changing at all. He is picking up forward status. Murphy Reed will also pick up forward status, basically exclusively playing forward. Even more so than Lawler, even more so than Ashcroft. That is what he is. He's been one of the surprise cash cows of the year. That SuperCoach ton he dished up a couple of weeks ago has really accelerated that price movement. He's been better than I expected he would. I thought goals would really be the avenue he needed to score well. Even after that round 1 match against the Cats, I'm like, geez, he's kicked a lot of goals, but he hasn't popped a big score. But he's finding other ways to not only build into the AFL scoring, but finding other ways to score in SuperCoach and fantasy. He's not worth trading into, let's be really clear. But if you're an owner, again, this is just going to add that flexibility. Okay, all right, someone that I might be able to field for a week while I do an upgrade somewhere else and make some moves. So I think it could be handy. Travis Boak, he's picking up forward status, 47%. And then, look, I don't love this other one, but I'll throw it out there anyway. Sam Doherty with 42%. Look, he scored okay in a couple of games. His points per minute on field is, over the last month has been actually quite sound. But Carlton just feel like such a mess at the moment that I couldn't trust not only his role, but I actually couldn't trust whether he's in the team consistently week in, week out. In chatting with Carlton content creators and Carlton friends that are in the know, they're like, yeah, if they're going to send a message, he's probably the one that might get messaged. So to me, I think it's handy if you're an owner in draft, in classic. I couldn't advocate for it, but it sits in there. Hey, and let me then rapid fire a couple of names that I think it's possible, but I don't know if it's going to happen to wrap it up. Look, Chad Warner's currently sitting at 36%, so it is on the margins for us right now with 35%. So it is a live play, but if 3 or 4 centre bounces, he's a bit more in than he is out, it's game over. He is on the knife's edge. We will not know this one, even after the game, unless he's exclusively forward, which he won't be. It's there. Look, if he doesn't play this week, he gets it. So not hoping for any injuries, but that'd be a nice gain. Will Ashcroft currently sitting at 30%. I don't know if he's going to get there. I feel like they've settled in with that role for him. I just don't know if he's going to get to the 35% threshold. We'd love it. It would be great. Just don't know if it's going to land. So I think he'll probably miss out, but he is spending a little bit more time, more forward of the ball than he has recently. As to is Zach Merritt. He's on that same percentage threshold as a Will Ashcroft, but any hoped that he'd not be in and around that midfield unit as much really got hurt when Caldwell went down with the hamstring injury during the bye. I just don't think or see now the world in the way where they go, well, we're going to win the game and we're going to play Merritt a little bit more forward. He's got to play a heavier split than he has at all this season, and without Caldwell. I don't see it coming. Let's hope and pray it does, because he's then the number 1 forward for the year in that realm, but I don't think that's happening. Sid Draper, the young crow, is right on the threshold of 35%. Again, much like Warner, we'll wait and see. I don't think he's highly owned across the formats, but it could be handy if you're sitting there in your AFL Fantasy or SuperCoach draft. Dan Curtin, I think he'll pick up midfield status, 41%, but not hugely a relevant name, but he's around the marker. Caleb Windsor is actually currently sitting on 99% defender, but he's only played the 2 games, so he's got to hit the 3. So if he's named and plays this week, he'll also gain defense, but he's in the possibles because he hasn't met the criteria elements yet. And then the last one that I think we'd be loving to get, but I don't think it's going to land, is Tuke Miller. He's currently sitting at 28% time forward, and just that heavier midfield forward split. I know Flanders has come back into the side, not that that's hugely changed a lot of things up, but we need Tuke to play probably his heaviest forward split game of the year this week. So it is a live option, but we need something drastically changed in an accelerated way, like we would with Will Ashcroft, or Merritt. We need a similar level of almost a 50-50 game time split to get that right on the knocker of it happening. I don't think it's going to land, but it's at least a live play. And there you go. I think there's about 50 names we're about to get. Now, when they hit the game, they'll be announced once lockout is kind of processing. They're pretty good at it these days. Once the games are done, they get that last game of data, they make sure it's there, and then they hit it as an announcement. And then once the lockout lifts, these positions should be noticeable in game. So they will land in Sunday night, if not definitely, in the latter hours of Monday morning or the early hours of Monday morning. So I think we're going to see a big change to the game. There's some premiums that are going to hit that forward line, like a Petracca, that become very interesting. There's some defenders, the Dacos, the Lairds, that become very, very interesting to me. And then there's some handy rooks that we've got right now that are just going to add squad versatility. So some big changes coming to your AFL Fantasy and SuperCoach teams. But why don't you comment below and let me know what position changes are you banking on heading into this first allocation of dual position gains? I'd love to know. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed not only this video, but also the ones we've done this week on the channel right now. SuperCoach top 10 trade targets, AFL Fantasy trade targets, they are also on the channel as well. Myself joined by fellow panelist Mini Monk, talking through the big strategy dilemmas, whether it's the Noddy out, the Will Day, what premiums to target, how are you going to handle the best 22s of this and the coming weeks. It's all in our strategy session. All these episodes are on the channel. Make sure you go and check it out. And if you are enjoying these episodes, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn the notifications on. So as soon as another episode drops, you get notified straight to your device. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope the player you're aiming for picks up DPP, and we'll be back chatting with you early next week as we depart gather round and head into another big week of fantasy footy.